Today, our mini-series takes us to Connecticut, where the Roadside Strangler caused terror among the residents. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. On July 26, 1959, Michael Bruce Ross was introduced to the world. His mother, Patricia, had gotten pregnant out of wedlock, and his father, Dan, tried to do the right thing and marry her. The couple would get married and welcome their first child. Eventually, Michael Bruce Ross would become the eldest of 4 children. The family would live on a chicken farm in Connecticut, but unfortunately, home life was anything but happy. Their home life seemed to become more dysfunctional as the years passed. Michael's mother, Patricia, was an incredibly violent woman. She beat and humiliated her children, and it seemed that Michael got the worst of it. His mother would become institutionalized on more than one occasion. At one point, Patricia was having an affair, and she left the family to go with her lover to North Carolina. But eventually, her husband, Dan, would go down, bring her back, and she would end up in the institution again. This downward spiral just continued. Michael Ross was a chronic bedwetter, and his mother would do anything to humiliate him. She would hang his wet sheets out the window, and then she would make him wear his soiled underwear on his head while he did chores around the house. At the age of 12, Michael Ross took a 6-year-old girl into the woods and molested her. When Michael Ross was 6 years old, his teenage uncle, who was 16 at the time, committed suicide. The thing is, many family members believe that this uncle killed himself because he had been molesting Michael Ross from the time that Michael was a little boy. Although Michael's home life was quite turbulent to say the least, he was a very intelligent young man. He would eventually attend Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and he studied economics. Although at this time he seemed like a normal young man who was functioning well at college, there was darkness in Michael. He would later say that he started having sexual fantasies at the age of 13, though he would note that they weren't violent, but mostly that he would take a woman and eventually she would fall in love with him. So they may not have been violent, but they weren't normal. He wanted to imprison somebody until they fell in love with him. That should say a lot about the 13-year-old's mental state. During his sophomore and senior year in college, Michael Ross would begin stalking women on campus, and soon after, he would commit his first murder. After graduating college, Michael would become an insurance salesman, and he seemed to blend in just fine at work. Nobody really noticed that anything was particularly wrong with him. He was nice, he was polite, he was good at his job. The thing is, nobody knew that Michael Ross was targeting young women who were walking alone at night and hitchhikers. When Michael would see a young woman or girl walking, a lot of the times he'd get out of his vehicle and try to lure them into it before forcefully taking them to a remote place. He would then tie their hands and feet before raping them. He would then tell them to turn over on their stomach and that he was going to let them go. The thing is, he didn't. After he told them to turn over to their stomach, he would strangle them. Michael would eventually be caught because he attacked the wrong woman.
I saw this woman walking along the road with a stroller. I pulled off the side of the road. She came into the driveway, walked up the driveway. I was behind the house. She saw me and I grabbed her. I told her that if she didn't do what I wanted, that I would smash the baby's head against the wall of the house. Where I think that's important is I've always said that I never understood why the women never really resisted me. I'm not a big, strong guy. Nobody ever seemed to fight. And I've always attributed to that I must say something like that, similar to the other victims. I raped her, strangled her. I left her for dead. The only reason she's not dead has nothing to do with me. It's strictly an act of God.
He became very frightened when he woke up the next morning and he read the headlines in the local paper that this woman had crawled with her baby to the nearby highway, flagged down a car, and that she was still alive.
Michael Ross would claim that he murdered women because he couldn't control his anger, and this especially happened when he was in a relationship.
When I was with one woman in particular, I killed 4 people. Then I had a relationship with another woman, and I didn't kill anyone. I did rape a person, but I didn't kill her. And then when I went with another woman, I killed 4 people. So there is a direct connection between who I'm with when I actually kill people. They say what it is that I can't hurt the person that I'm with. It's called splitting. I love that person. I need that person for my emotional well-being. So I take the anger that I feel towards that person and I inflict it on someone unknown, someone that I don't know at all, that have no emotional ties to at all. And someone who I can make as a non-person. That's how I kill them.
His list of victims include Song Nakao Tu, who was 25. She was murdered May 12, 1981, and she was a Cornell University student. Miss Tu was a 25-year-old graduate student at Cornell University. She was studying economics, and unfortunately, she was discovered in the water of Fall Creek. It had been the first fatality, but the final victim in a series of sexual assaults at Cornell that were happening that spring. The thing is, at first, they believed that she committed suicide, but that wasn't the case. Her older brother would go on to say, "My sister went back to college one day, and then we heard she was dead, and that was it." Eventually, they would learn that her death was connected to a serial killer. He would go on to say, "It was thought likely that whoever had murdered my sister was one of these people who had the wrong wiring. They prey on strangers and are very difficult to catch unless they do something to attract attention." He would also note that his father has never been able to mention the murder. It turns out that Michael Ross would eventually confess to murdering these girls, and Miss Tu was his first victim. On Thanksgiving Day in 1983, Michael Ross noticed 19-year-old Robin S. on the grounds of a state hospital in Norwich, New York. He would pull Robin into a wooded area and forced her to remove her clothes. He would sexually assault her and ordered her to turn over on her stomach. He would then strangle her and leave her in those woods. On June 13, 1984, Michael Ross noticed 17-year-old Wendy B. as she was walking along the road. He'd pull over and have a short conversation with the young girl. After talking to her, he would pull Wendy over a stone wall and force her to go into a wooded area with him, and that led to an open field. There, he would sexually assault her, force her to turn over on her stomach, and strangle her. On Easter Sunday in 1984, Michael Ross would pick up a 14-year-old April B. and 14-year-old Leslie S. The 2 girls had been hitchhiking. The girls asked him to take them to a gas station, and he said that he would, but they soon noticed that he drove right past the gas station. April would pull out a knife and threaten him with it, but he would disarm her and continue his drive. He would eventually park his car, he would bound both girls' hands and feet, and then he would untie April and force her to walk a short distance from his car. There, he would assault her, turn her over on her stomach, and strangle her. As he's doing this, he mentions that he can hear Leslie in the car trying to comfort April. After murdering April, he returned to the car and he killed Leslie. His list of victims would include Song Nakok Tu, who was 25, Tammy Williams, who was 17, Paula Piera, who was 16, Deborah Smith Taylor, who was 23, Robin Dawn Stavinsky, who was 19, April Brunis, who was 14, and Leslie Shelley, who was 14, and Wendy Barable, who was 17. Michael Ross would confess to 8 murders and was convicted of 4 of them. He was sentenced to death in Connecticut. In 2001, while on death row, Michael Ross pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter for killing Paula in New York in 1982, and he was sentenced to 8 to 25 years in prison. He would spend almost 18 years on death row before his execution. During his incarceration, he did meet a woman who later became his fiancée. Eventually, she would break up with him, but she would still visit him up until his death. Apparently, after his arrest, he became a devout Catholic, and he had a regular meeting with 2 priests throughout the years and prayed with rosary each morning. During his time, he also translated documents into Braille, acted as a mentor to other inmates, and then financially sponsored a child from the Dominican Republic. Apparently, Michael Ross did oppose of the death penalty, but he supported the death penalty in his case. He would say that he wanted to spare the victims' families from any more harm. An official close to the case would go on to say, Ross believed that he had been forgiven by God and that he would be going to a better place once he was executed. He's not being punished, he's moving on to a life eternal. That's what is ironic about the death penalty. He's looking forward to the peace. He's had a horrible life and he's wanted to do good. Although Ross didn't detest his death sentence, other people did. They weren't sure that he was mentally competent to be making these decisions. In the early hours of January 26, 2005, Ross's lawyer, acting on behalf of Michael Ross's father, obtained a 2-day stay of execution. He was then scheduled to die by lethal injection on January 29, 2005 at 2:01 a.m. But unfortunately, the execution was again postponed because of doubts that he was mentally competent. His attorney would claim that Michael Ross was incompetent to waive appeals as he was suffering from death row syndrome. Eventually, Michael Ross was executed by lethal injection on May 13, 2005 in Connecticut at the age of 45 years old. He didn't request a special last meal before facing his execution. He just had the regular prison meal. And when asked if he'd like to make a last statement, he kept his eyes closed and said, "No, thank you." After his execution, a psychiatrist who had argued that Ross was not competent to waive his appeal received a letter from Ross dated on May 10, 2005, and it simply read, "Check and mate. You never had a chance." Michael Ross's execution was the first in Connecticut and in all of New England since 1960. It was also the first and only execution in Connecticut administered by lethal injection. As of June 2020, Ross is the last inmate executed in Connecticut since the death penalty was abolished on April 25, 2012. Robin Stavinsky's sister would go on to say, "We feel sorrow for the Ross family and respect the grief at them losing a family member. We know the sadness of losing Robin will always remain, but now the anger caused by Michael Ross's crimes can begin to fade to a safe place." Songtu's brother would go on to say, "We wish to have him destroyed. Mr. Ross is a diseased animal that society is well justified to flush down its sewer system." When April's stepfather asked why they weren't going to attend his execution, he would go on to say, "Her youngest brother is about to graduate from adult ed later this month. That's the event we're concentrating on. We'll definitely go to that." Mr. Tu would give an interview about his daughter's death. He would go on to say, "I used to sit in that seat and look at that tree outside the window and see her up there, but I also knew I had to go on with my life. I still had a family." His execution will go a long way toward putting my mind at rest and giving me peace. I hope this will go ahead, that nothing's going to stop it. Certainly in my mind, I have questions about the death penalty, but when someone's in my position, abstract considerations are no longer that important. He would say that his daughter, who was just 5 feet tall and weighed less than 100 pounds, was an idealist who worked hard. She sponsored orphan children through the mail. She volunteered to help cancer patients. She graduated from Walt Whitman High School in 1973 and from Vassar College in 1977. He would go on to say, "My feeling about it mostly is that it's such a shame that her life was snuffed out. She would have been a really good person to have in the world, not just for her family, but society." Leslie's family was very big on the death penalty. They wanted Michael Ross to be put to death. They would go on to say, "I don't think he's mentally ill. He might have a mental disorder, but he graduated from Cornell and he knew right from wrong." They would talk about her one and only home run in softball when she was 13 and how she liked to wait up for her mother to finish the night shift so she could play cards and talk. They also said that she would become incredibly stubborn, but was just a little sweetheart and as pretty as a picture. They would say, "You think you remember a lot. You got the face visualized, but you don't remember that much after 21 years. Months after their daughter died, they sprung into action. They met with other victims of Michael Ross. They would meet with state legislators to establish a prison psychiatric review board, and they persuaded state officials to hire victims advocates for each county. I feel that it's often easy to sympathize with people like Michael Ross, and I don't mean that as we sympathize with a serial killer. I more so mean that we acknowledge he had a tough upbringing. The thing is, I don't like sympathizing with people like him because a lot of us have had it rough, and a lot of people out there did come from abusive families just like his. The thing is, they don't go out and murder women and little girls. They get help. So for me, this whole idea of, well, he had a rough childhood and all of that is just completely disheartening. So many people struggle in life, and yet They give kindness and love, and they take care of other people. I feel that Michael Ross, although he had a tragic and horrible upbringing, he did know right from wrong. And that's clear by just listening to him talk. The fact is, he acted on his impulses and his fantasies and his desires. He didn't care that he was murdering these women and these little girls. I feel that with true crime, we kind of always struggle in this place because we are curious about the people that commit these crimes. And we want to know what they're thinking. We want to know what makes somebody this type of person. And we pretty much know what can turn people like this, but it's really hard to grasp as humans that somebody could be this violent. I think it's really important to look at the victims, a 13 and 14-year-old girl who were going to the movies and who were met with just a terrible and violent fate. They had their whole lives ahead of them. A graduate at college who was studying economics and was working hard and was happy, and she was a loving and kind person. Her life was snatched away from her. And all the other women who were just doing nothing. They were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and they became victims. It breaks my heart to know that these women and these young girls never had a chance to live out their lives. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop in the comments below and I'll be sure to get to it. In the meantime, check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you then.